Another live episode here going out from the Long Beach Area Chamber of Commerce. My name is Stuart Takahara, Vice President of Membership here, and excited to be joined again by Matt Bartos from the Figure Agency. Matt, welcome to the Catalyst again. It's always good to have you.
It's great to be back. We had a great time last time on the premiere episode, so it's
Yes.
exciting to actually be involved in episode 2 now. So
Yeah, and so last time we talked marketing, small business. Today we're going to be talking about branding. Is your brand working for you, and what to look for inside of your own business? So I want to start with just for people who don't know, what is branding? What is branding for business?
So in general, when we've done some events with the chamber, public events where we've met and talked with business owners and things like that, and we sort of describe it the same way for everybody, just as like an entry point, that branding is that it's a distinct message or image and personality of your business. Essentially, it's the always on common thread that shapes the customer's perception of who you are and what it is that you do as a business, right?
So
customers who trust your brand will eagerly return again and again.
So can you give me an example of what it would be like what is a brand that I would recognize?
It's funny that it's easy to point to the global ones, right? So, Coca-Cola, for instance. And the reason why, actually, I see these as parallels. Jack and Coke, I call it, right? So Jack Daniels and Coca-Cola, right? So global beverage brands. But the remarkable thing about those brands is, just in terms of scope, size, and scale, pretty much anywhere you go in the world, you can come across a Coca-Cola product, right? And that experience that you have with that Coca-Cola product, the brand experience you have, is sort of insanely consistent. So the experience of what the packaging looks like, the description of what the product is, and how you come into contact with it, how it's displayed, the experience of actually consuming it, right? It generally remarkably tastes somewhat similar wherever you are in the world. Although there's certainly a debate about Mexican Coke and American
I was just going to bring that up. Yeah.
But it's amazingly remarkable, consistent experience. And if you come across the billboard, it's the same identity. You don't even need the words Coke. You kind of can identify it from that. The same way with like Jack Daniels. You can go to remarkably any bar, and you know this from your own experience. You can go to any bar in the United States or globally, for that matter, and find Jack Daniels, which is a remarkable entity of market share and brand experience, for sure.
I think of a brand and I see the McDonald's arches or the Nike swoosh, something along those lines, and it means something. Just like status, you have the Louis Vuitton wardrobes or the Coach bags and stuff like that, right? That brand has status. It means something. It means it tells you when it's like, oh, I drive a BMW or I drive an Audi or I drive a Ford. Those brands mean something and it represents something.
Yeah, and I would go back to experience, right? So it represents an experience. You mentioned automobiles. So with BMW, if you drive a BMW, I had a friend who had one. I had never driven one before. Their branding was always about the ultimate driving machine, right?
Yeah.
So I had never driven one, and I like cars, and I was able to drive his car. He needed me to take it like to the airport or something like that. And I was like, I got in, I started driving it. I'm like, oh yeah, this is completely different. I get it. I understand why the attraction to this vehicle, this machine, the engineering behind this, it all started to align just from the experience. And that ultimately is the core of what branding is. It's the experience that you as a consumer have, and then it's the job of the business to replicate that over and over again so that you have the same experience and you build upon that, as you go down the line.
So those are great examples of like big brands with billion-dollar global budgets. But how does a small business, a little mom and pop store, Main Street business, apply these same techniques into their own store or into their own business? What does that look like?
I think the place to start is, ultimately the 10 pitch, or I call it the 10 pitch. So it's the first thing that you're going to come into as a consumer, the first touch on what that brand is. And for a small business, I think it's very important, and I'm going to use this word a lot, but consistency, right?
Mhm.
It's very important that wherever I come into contact with your brand, you may be a, micro-sized business that, you have a coffee cart in the middle of a corporate center or whatever. But wherever I come into contact with that, I want to know that it's your brand. I want to know that I see the same colors, I see the same logo, I see the same messaging. I see the same product availability, right? If you're offering a product, or if you offer a service, the same, you're offering the same services wherever I come into contact with the brand. And from a small business standpoint, that consistency is extremely important. If nothing else we say in this conversation, I would go back to that core point of making sure that all the places that your brand exists, wherever your brand presence is, it is consistent in message, in identity, in presentation, so that, as a consumer, it creates those multiple touches create that familiarity.
Mhm.
And I know, I start to associate your brand with whatever it is whatever product you're offering or what service you're offering. It's the adage, and it keeps changing as sort of the internet speeds up and AI starts to take over and everything else. But ultimately, with a consumer, you need, a dozen touches or so with that consumer in order to start to get into the mindset of that consumer when it comes to whatever, context you're selling your product in. And that tent pitch, the consistency in your tent pitch is very important.
Consistency is key. I've always said that just in everything, even when I'm hiring staff. I'd rather have somebody operating at 70%, 100% of the time, as opposed to someone coming in and being 110% one day and 30% the next day, and then 45% the day after. That inconsistency and that sense of unknown is actually potentially creating confusion or inconsistent experiences for your customers, and so they never know what they're going to get.
Yeah, I would go a little bit more macro than that, which is, let's use a product description as an example. So, if you're selling products, whether you have a combination or separate, just e-commerce only, or retail and e-commerce, or retail or brick and mortar, the product description that you use to describe that the language should be the same wherever you see it, because ultimately that's the thing that the consumer is trying to purchase, and you're trying to consistently inform their buying information, their buying opinion about it. So, if you describe the product differently on your social platform versus your e-commerce site versus the end cap display that you've paid for and built, in your local market, or in a national chain, if you're describing the product that you're trying to sell differently in every place, that's going to create confusion for a consumer. There's going to be like, well, I thought it was this, but now you're saying it's this, and all that. And so
Well,
that consistency piece is important.
and not only that, it's going to create confusion for the consumer. But as we move into this age of AI and ChatGPT and LLMs and stuff like that, they're looking for what's called trust signals. These AI bots are looking for consistency through, if you're a Shopify store, from your website, from your reviews, from all these different places. They're looking for a strong, consistent message that is going to increase your trust score, the abilities to be found on AI or even be recommended by AI. So that's more important even now, about sending a strong, consistent message, a single, strong, consistent message.
I'm glad you mentioned the employee factor to this too, because my description was about, messaging and actually, printed material, printed words.
Mm-hmm.
But the same thing happens with what your employees, even if it's only you or you have 100 employees, the same thing applies to them. They need to uphold that brand standard, so that when they're describing the products, they're using the same language that I read, right? They're using the same language that, that, Robert is using the same language as Bob, as David, as Stuart, as everybody's using the same language, so that, again, you're creating that consistency, and I, as a consumer, don't have to work harder in order to get to my buying decision.
Mm-hmm. So when we're looking at things from a consumer standpoint, we need to move them from a process. So if they've never experienced your brand, your company, your services or whatever, it's kind of like window shopping. They're like, well, I don't even know if I want to buy here yet, right? So you have a term for this kind of person.
Yeah, I call it spectators, right? So these are the, I'm just looking customers, or I'm browsing, right? And think of it from a retail experience. Often, we've all had it where we've walked into a, retail establishment. Someone asks us if we need help, if we're looking for something, and sometimes we are, sometimes we aren't. But I think spectators they're just spectating, right? So they're just looking at your brand. They've come into contact with it somewhere, and they're just kind of on the periphery. They may not, more often than not, they may not have a specific need at that moment. But it's important that you establish the brand, or begin to establish the brand at that piece, so that if the need arises, you're the one that comes to the top of their mind when it comes to buying that product or that service.
I think of I'm just looking as every time I hear that, I always think of car shopping. When you go on the lot, you park your car, next thing you know, you got 4 salesmen. You're like, stop! I'm just looking. Like, I'm not buying anything today. And you always get those that go, well, are you sure? Or let me show you around, or or something like that. That's just, and when you think of a brand, I don't know. That's what I think of with car dealerships. When you say I'm just looking, you just get swarmed, and you're like, every time you say that, that's my interpretation, that's my perception of what car shopping is like. That's part of the brand process, right?
Yeah. And I think in terms of how you apply your branding to that spectating customer, is that you can present a problem that your brand has a solution for, right? It can be subtle, but you can, that may, again, the customer may not have a need for it at that moment, but if you present a problem that they're not really thinking about, and this product, solves that problem, that's a great place to start to interject that. The other thing to do at that stage is to invite to learn more, right? So your brand should, extend an invitation to come and learn a little bit more about the product, even if, again, they don't have a need. If you think about it, buying is an impulse, right? And it's a dopamine hit often for people, the retail therapy idea, right? Even if you're buying something practical, there's still a little hit you get from, you may not think of groceries as an impulse buy, but when you go and buy groceries, all of a sudden you'll come across, I don't know, something that looks delicious, and it's unique, and you want to try it. You get home and you're like, you might forget about it, but later on you come across the package and you're like, oh yeah, I forgot I bought this. I want to try it, right? Are you inviting, these spectators to come and learn more about your product? And I think the third point is to keep them entertained. So, and this is where I think social media marketing comes into play, where you can be a little bit more entertaining in your marketing and your advertising, but, entertain them, provide, perhaps it's a chance to provide something that's a little more creative than just, words on a piece of paper. You can give a little bit more personality of your brand there.
So I understand what I'm just looking, or a spectator, is if I have a retail store. Maybe I'm in a mall, or I'm going to that. But what does that look like for like a restaurant? Like, you don't go into a restaurant and say, I'm just looking. You're going into this restaurant because you're hungry, you want food, and you've already decided, I'm going to eat here. So for that restaurant, what does a spectator, or I'm just looking, what does that look like in terms of brand presence and getting a customer from that phase into the restaurant?
I would slightly disagree with your point, only in that, as a spectator, if I'm hungry, your restaurant may not be the thing that I'm looking for, right? I may not know what I'm looking for. I just know I'm hungry, right? Mm-hmm. Think of it like a food court analogy, right? In a mall, you've got you know, 10 different types of restaurants and food concepts that are in there, all these different sounds and smells and sights and, you know, and signage and everything else, and pictures of food and images and everything. And you may not know, as a spectator, you may not know what it is you want. You just know you're hungry. Like that's kind of a desire. So I think at that point, it goes back to those things I just mentioned from a restaurant standpoint. And depending on the type, food court is a little bit more on the nose. But you know, if you're thinking in terms of, let's say, a heavy pedestrian area where there's a lot of different restaurants, you know, you're on, you know, in California here, you're on what's the main Belmont Shores, right? So you're on that drag, and there's all those restaurants and everything else, and you're looking around thinking, all right, there's an Italian place. It looks kind of cool, meaning it's got a welcoming environment. You know, the seating looks cozy and interesting. You're with a date perhaps, or a significant other, and you just want a romantic evening out, right? So you're going to seek restaurants that pitch themselves as, you know, being a place for romantic dinners to come to, right? And so I think that's something that restaurants can do. The other thing is the cuisine itself, right? So you could push, you know, if it's Italian food, it can be, you know, you're pushing, this is our, you know, our great grandmother's recipes that we've brought, you know, from Italy over. Like you get into more of the deeper branding elements of it in order to create that appetite. Right. So you're trying to sway appetite at that point. What do I want? Mediterranean? Do I want Greek? Do I want, you know, American food? Do I want bistro? Do I want, you know, bar food? Whatever it is, people, you know, will apply their current feelings and their experience to it, and it's up to the restaurant to make it attractive.
And that's what you have a separate term. That's what this next group is, the shoppers. It sounds like.
Yeah, shoppers, who I think, you know, the I'm looking for, right? So I'm looking for X, Y, and Z. Customers who are actively seeking the type of products or services the brand offers.
I'm looking for,
and most importantly,
I'm looking for a great date night restaurant. I'm looking for really good Italian food. I'm looking for, they already moved on to, from I'm just looking, what should we do, to I know specifically what I want to buy. Now I'm trying to find it.
I have a reason to you know, patronize that, right? I have a reason to seek that out. And I think a really important piece of shoppers is that, and the way to consider shoppers is that they're comparatively shopping. So from a restaurant perspective, it goes back to the example, you know, I was just describing, where I'm walking down, you know, through Belmont Shores on that main drag there, and there are, you know, multiple restaurant concepts for me to get into. Or if let's say I'm trying to buy a gift, there's multiple, you know, places where I can, well, maybe I want to buy him a book, or maybe I want to buy him a piece of clothing, or maybe I want to buy him a, you know, a bottle of wine, or a beachy thing, or whatever it is. I'm going to compare and contrast brands with each other when I am a shopper, right? Because I'm trying to find value, and the value isn't necessarily, it's not only associated with cost, right? The value can be, you know, yes, this product may be more expensive than the other, but is it more luxurious? Is the build quality better of it? If we're talking about services, like if you're trying to compare two, you know, sort of massage places, right? Well, this place offers the type of massage that I like, and this other place doesn't offer that, or they both offer the same thing, but this one seems to be a little bit, I just like the branding a little bit more. It feels a little more natural. I want to go to that one. So shoppers, I think you should, you know, when you're trying to attract a shopper who's already in the context of wanting to purchase, you know, how are you presenting your value and separating it from the competition, right? We do this better because we are this, right? Or we, you know, our products are better because of this. You know, they're more wholesome, they're more natural. We don't use, you know, these bad ingredients, et cetera, et cetera. You know, this is where you have an opportunity to provide details and more education opportunities for your consumer from a messaging standpoint, right? So you're providing a little bit, because they're comparing, right? And so if you provide detail for your product that's a little better than the detail that's being provided, or if any is being provided for another similar product in your category, you're going to, for a consumer that wants to be informed, you have a better shot of, helping them get to their buying decision more quickly. The last piece of that would be, this is a good place to also talk about consumer success stories, right? So if I'm shopping, I'll use the e-commerce as an example. Ratings, like, consumer ratings heavily weigh into that decision from an e-commerce standpoint, right? How many stars has this product been rated? This brand, how many, or this business, how many stars, have been rated? What are the, we all have, I think, this tendency to want to look at the negative comments first, right? Why didn't people like it versus why did so many like it? I think, that's when you're trying to attract shoppers from a brand standpoint. These are the things you want to cover.
We're talking with Matt Bartos from the Figure Agency here on the Catalyst, the Chambers and Long Beach Area Chamber of Commerce podcast. We're going live right now. If you guys are watching and you have questions about anything that Matt or I are talking about, you can go ahead and drop them in the chat, and then we'll be able to see those and respond back. So this is an interactive kind of program if you're watching us live right now. So please take advantage of that. So you move from the I'm just looking phase to the I'm looking for phase. And then what happens after that?
Well, at that point, you're as a business, you're getting real close to the finish line, right? And so I'll use an athletic phrase. You don't want to fumble the ball on the 1 yard line. So if you've talked to spectators, you've converted them to shoppers, because now they're comparing you with other products and brands, and you won that competition. So now they're ready to purchase. Now they're buyers, right? They're heading to checkout, as it is, right? Consumers who are on your site or at a retail location, and they're ready to spend their money. Which ultimately, that's kind of one of the hardest things to get to from a brand standpoint is, moving a customer to that position where they're comfortable. They know enough about your product or service. They've been educated enough. They know what they're getting themselves. They have a sense of what they're getting themselves into, and they're ready to buy it. They're on board.
And so many businesses fail at this most critical step. It seems like you've got your credit card in hand, and you're looking around, and you're just looking for somebody to I'm giving you my money, and they make it so hard sometimes to take money to actually make a sale. It is unbelievable. I think this is, especially in a lot of service-based businesses, I'm thinking bars and restaurants, I'm thinking retail sometimes, where you're just looking around, the line's way too long, and you're like, you know what, I don't want it that bad. And they kind of get up and leave. There's so many times where, at least in my own experience too, it's like, I want this, I want to buy it, I made up my mind, I came here, I drove here specifically for this, and it's like I give up. So many businesses fail at that point.
It's all that hard work that you put into, and it's important to put yourself in this perspective, but all that hard work you put in marketing wise, attracting that customer, converting them to a shopper, converting them to a buyer, to fumble the ball on the 1 yard line because the checkout experience is poor, right? So, it's very important. I think you should analyze your checkout experience. And when I say that contextually, that just sounds like e-commerce, but really it's, like you mentioned, services, right? So from a service perspective, if you're offering services like an agency, right? So we don't have a barcode that we scan per service and we, check you out, right? It's more often you come up with a scope of work, you have an agreement, and then there's an invoice, and that invoice gets paid, right? So if you complicate that process and make it difficult for someone to release their money to you, you've handicapped your business massively at that point. So, is your language clear about what's being purchased? Again, going back to consistency of messaging. Is the actual purchase and the fees and everything, is that all clearly defined? Because we've all been there where we've bought something and we get to the purchase, and all of a sudden there's another. I think Airbnb was terribly guilty of this, but you get to the finish line, all of a sudden there's a cleaning and a cleaning fee that's 35% more than what you were expecting to pay because it wasn't included in the original renting price, right? And so now you're like, it's offensive. And now it's very easy for a customer to be like, I know I want it, but I find this very offensive. I'm not going to buy it, right?
And
what's your return? Do you have, go ahead.
Sorry. Oh no, I was going to say, and those kind of trick fees or hidden fees or whatever really makes it hard for what step 4 was going to be. But before we get into step 4, the last section, go ahead and finish up what you were saying about the buyers and all that.
Is your return policy clear? Do you have a return policy? If you don't have one, it's important to say, this, we don't, food products are often like that. We don't take food back, right? Is the payment convenient? How many ways are you offering payment, right? So, all the different electronic ways to pay now, obviously. I don't want to have to download an app, right, to pay you. If you only take payment, not every business obviously can take payment in every single form, but it's very important that up front you educate the customer like, well, we take these types of payments, period. We can do credit card, we can do Venmo, we can do PayPal, and that's it, right? Or cash or whatever. I think, and then you start also analyze, like, are you upselling? So at that point of purchase, are you also offering other similar products? This is an e-commerce tactic, obviously, but are you offering other similar products that a customer at that, when they're really in that mode to buy something, they're more apt to spend a little bit more as long as you create that attraction and make it attractive, right? Are you upselling? Are you gifting? Are you offering incentives, right? A promotion, a discount, whatever. Be very clear about that language. Is there more to purchase that will enhance the customer experience, right? So if I'm purchasing, this is probably not a good example, but if I'm purchasing a tennis racket, do I also want to purchase sweatbands to make my hands not so sweaty? Do I want to purchase a nice wrap for the handle to make it more grippy? Do I want to purchase, a really cool looking bag to put it in and carry it to the tennis? Do I want to purchase, these specific balls to practice with to make me a better player? Again, what can enhance that experience? And finally,
those are all upselling opportunities too, right? Opportunities.
Yeah.
They've already got the credit card in hand. They're already buying. You might as well sell them something else while they're at it.
Yeah. And the last, and I think most important thing about checkout is deliver on everything you promise. So, because that is the biggest conversion factor towards the last category that we're going to talk about. You have to deliver on the things you promise. If you overpromise and underdeliver, we said this in the last session. If you overpromise and underdeliver as a brand, it's a death sentence, because ultimately you are creating a bad experience because you said that your product would do all this stuff, and then the consumer gets it and it does this much, or it doesn't do it effectively, or it was misrepresented in its messaging, or a bunch of different places. And I hope everyone hears this. Like, we are talking about all these different things from these previous steps, making sure that the experience is consistent all the way through. So deliver on everything you promise. Absolute critical step for buyers.
Because when you do that, when you deliver on your promises, what happens to these customers?
These customers become, and this is the golden ticket for a business, these customers become loyalists. Right? So they become brand loyalists. You find this a lot in automobile, right? In cars. There are a lot of people who they drive one kind of car, they have a great experience with it, and that's the car they want to come back and buy more. And so that car brand does a lot to incentivize that consumer coming back to buy more and more, right? Mm-hmm. But I'm back for more customers who've purchased in the past and who have the same need in the future and will purchase again. You want to, from a brand perspective, you have to start looking at it. Is the experience as as consistently easy as it was before when they purchased before? Has it become easier? Has it become more convenient? Has it become more enjoyable from a brand perspective? Those are all incentives that you can promote and market to that returning buyer. That, hey, come on back. We've made purchasing more convenient, right? We've made, we're offering this promotion, for our loyal customers. So it's also a great place to get feedback, right? So incentivize ratings. Talk to your customers and say, hey, if you really enjoyed the experience you had with this particular product or service, would you give us a rating? Here, we'll make it very easy for you. I got to do is, fill out this one form or however you want to create it. But, get feedback from your customers. Use that as your biggest marketing weapon. We talked about, when customers are in their shopping mode, they're doing comparative. And if they start seeing those ratings from positive experiences, that's a really, big feather in your cap as a business. Encourage them to come back for more. Remind them of a purchase cycle, right? So if you're purchasing something that runs out after time, right? And you see this, like, the first thing that comes to mind is the razor blades, right? So razor blades go dull, and a lot of these e-commerce razor brands, they offer replacement, right? And they'll remind you through their marketing tools, their CRM, they'll remind you, hey, come back and buy more, right? Because your blades are probably getting dull by now based on how many times a week you shave, you've told us, right? Come back and buy some more. Here's an incentive. Here's a promotion. Look, we've made it easier. All these things create ambassadors for your brand. It's important to look at, customers with success stories of your brand. They're your best ambassadors. It's that word of mouth marketing that you just can't buy. You have to, word of mouth marketing is the most effective thing that's out there. And it's only done because that consumer has had a consistent, really positive brand experience from the tent pitch all the way up through the buying experience. It's consistent and they're ready to come back for more.
I think of companies that I go to a lot, or businesses that I go to a lot, and there's always that consistent experience. I know I'm going to get a good quality product. I know that the line's going to go fast. I know that I'm going to be greeted with a smile, that the cashier is going to say thank you and welcome, and that the food comes out and everything is great. It's hot. That entire consistent product, it's hard to do on scale, but if you can get it done, if you can get that, then you will always have those loyalists, those people that just come back over and over and over again. It's funny, today I went to a place that just opened up in Seal Beach for lunch. My second time going there. I went there the first time, and you would think for a new business that's just opening up, I went there on like their third or fourth day of operation, that they would still have some kinks to work out. No, these guys were flawless. They got us in, they got us out. It was so fast and fantastic. And today I was running like on a time crunch. I was like, I need to find it. I didn't want to hit a fast food restaurant. I'm going back there because I know I can get a decent meal, good price, fast, easy, hot, simple, and then delivered again, second time. So now it's that kind of consistency and product and experience and speed really just makes a difference. And it doesn't take a lot to do. It's not hard to create.
And I think you're a business owner, I'm a business owner. I think it's very important to, if you're a business owner, recognize when you have a positive experience with a brand that's not your own, that has nothing to do with the thing that you're obsessed with, you have to think about every day. Like, take a second and go incognito, so to speak, and be present in those experiences and start to realize, like, okay, what did you say that was? It was a restaurant, you said, or like a
it was a fast casual restaurant. You go up to a counter, you order the counter, and then they call your number when your food's ready.
So, like, in a situation like that, it's important if you can sort of step back and look from a 50,000-foot viewpoint of like, okay, this was my experience as I went through it. I really like the fact that if it was a sit-down place, that the hostess came right up to me and welcomed me in and clearly explained like, okay, it's going to take 5 minutes to seat you, so that I had my expectations were set, and they met those expectations. They delivered on what they promised, right? And we got our food quickly. We were able to eat. It was delicious. They used all natural ingredients like they promoted. It tasted great. And they offered convenience, right? That was another thing that they offered was I was able to get in and out. How quickly I was able to get in and out. To pay was so quick, right? If it's a fast casual, you probably paid at a checkout, or did they do service?
No, just to check out. You walk up to the counter like a Starbucks and you just order and pay, and then they call your name when it's ready.
Yeah. So like, and then also taking notice of like all the employees in that process, and everyone's doing their job, but everyone is doing their job efficiently to give you the best experience possible. It may not be direct, but like the person who's cooking the food is not looking you in the eye while they're making it. They are, it's a little creepy, but they're not looking in the eye when they're making it like, you like this? Do you like this? No. But they're a trained professional at what they're doing. You can tell that they make what they make is, they care about it. There's quality to it. Like, are all the employees also on brand? I think it's another important factor.
When we look at brand, people think logos, colors, and this, but it really goes deeper down. If you were to spend just a little bit of time working on your brand, meaning quality, consistency, delivering on promises, making sure that entire buying cycle is as smooth and seamless as possible, you will get to that level of developing those loyalists that will start to promote you, start to talk about you, the ones that keep coming back for more. But that is, I think, one of the areas that a lot of people don't focus on. I think a lot of people really just focus on one and not know how that one connects to the next, that connects to the next, and to the final product there.
It goes, again, back to the first episode. One of the points we talked about was like asking tough questions. So analyzing your customer journey and having a critical eye about that, and not glossing over things that may be too difficult to deal with. You know what I mean? Like, if you notice that back to your product descriptions, if they're different in your packaging than they are on your website or wherever, like, and you realize like that's going to be a lot of work to change that, make that change, like acknowledge that change. And if it can't be done right away because you've got other things you have to handle, then make it part of your hit list, and part of you is like, okay, this is something I need to do. I need to sort of get my brand more consistent and get it shaped better and make it evolve. Those are all kind of just critical pieces, and no business is perfect, no brand is perfect.
I don't know what's happening on your side, Matt, but we lost you on that whole last little segment. It was all garbled. I don't know if it's coming through on the stream or what was happening, but I was kind of missing that. So I think because we hit the points and we want to try and work this out, let's just kind of take this through one final wrap up. Matt, you were with the Figure Agency. If people wanted to try and reach out to you and get more information about anything that we talked about brand building, the importance of it, how can people reach you? If we'll see how your signal is.
You absolutely can email me. The best thing to do is it's info info@figureagency.com. That does come directly to me, although it might sound like it goes to a bot, but it doesn't. It comes directly to me. I get them all the time. I have to answer. But reach out to me at info@figureagency.com. And if you have a question, anything about your branding, certainly can consult and help you. I'm happy to sit down with you for an hour and just take a look at kind of some of the problems you may be encountering from a brand perspective, and offer some advice or consultation in terms of correcting those things. But I love hearing from small businesses and people that are. It's hard to do. It's really hard to do, and it's nice to kind of be in the trenches with others who are going through some of the same things in terms of growth or consistency or just brand awareness. I like it.
You're completely garbled out of there, so I don't know. I'm sorry. So here's what we're gonna do, guys. Everyone who's watching this on the live stream, We're going to turn this live stream episode, we're going to edit it down, and it's going to be put up as a podcast in a few days. You'll be able to find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart, all the different podcast places. So if you're really interested in what Matt's saying, just look for that, because we recorded this high level so we could still be able to get all the content that you're saying. I just know that on the stream right now, probably not the best connection. So Matt with the Figure Agency, that's info@figureagency.com if you want to try and reach him. But definitely check out the podcast. That's going to have really good quality sound and video on that in just a few days. So Matt, thanks for joining us today on The Catalyst. We're really excited you are sharing your expertise and your insight with everybody watching. And I know we have a couple more of these coming up too. So we're going to work on these video problems, and we're going to be right back at you. So thanks everyone for joining us today, and we will see you guys in the next episode. Have a good one.
Thanks so much. Take care.